I was referencing at the top of the show this story about the clerk in Kentucky. I guess it's Rowan. They pronounce it Rowan. It's spelled Rowan, and that's in Kentucky. The clerk Kim Davis. She was not actually performing any marriages. She was refusing to perform marriages, not just for same-sex couples, but for straight couples as well. And she never said, "I don't want to see these people married." What she just said is, "I cannot have my name on these certificates." She was seeking an accommodation, and instead, a judge has thrown her in jail. Today, she is scheduled to get a visit from former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who's also a Baptist minister. And I was just reading this morning, she's also going to be getting a visit from Ted Cruz. Cruz has decided he's going to make a stop at the jail as well, and I'm sure they're going to talk with her and just tell her, look, there are a lot of people out there who support you. Keep it up. We're behind you. And this may well be starting a movement. The longer she is there, the more people are going to say, is it necessary that she be locked up? Huckabee was appearing on television over the weekend with George Snuffleupagus on ABC. Snuffleupagus is the son of an Eastern Orthodox minister or priest. Yet you wouldn't know it. I mean, he went to work for the Clintons and now is pushing liberalism in the guise of a news reporter on ABC. Here the two of them are talking, and Snuffleupagus says, well, yeah, but Governor Huckabee, come on now. A lot of your fellow conservatives think that the woman should have gone to jail and should rot there.
This is going to backfire on the religious liberty movement. What's your response?
Well, he would have hated Abraham Lincoln because Lincoln ignored the 1857 Dred Scott decision that said black people weren't fully human. It was a wrong decision. And to say that we have to surrender to judicial supremacy is to do what Jefferson warned against, which is, in essence, surrender to judicial tyranny. And we had so many different presidents, including Jefferson, Jackson, Lincoln. There were other founders like Hamilton, Adams, who made it very clear that the courts can't make a law. The Constitution is expressly clear that that's a power reserved to Congress.
I think his point is, sure enough, you had a court ruling with all of this, but now you have to turn around and you have to come up with something else, because the court ruling, according to Governor Huckabee, who's, we should point out, running for president as a Republican, he says it's not definitive. And I think that a lot of people out there hear that and they say, well, yeah, but now you're splitting hairs in this situation, and we've got to get rid of people like you because you're harmful, etc. And after all, Governor, I mean, it's just religious faith. Aren't you engaging in just mythology? Well, he then went on and had a question for the host, Mr. Snuffleupagus.
George, can you cite for me what statute Kim Davis would be required to follow in order to issue a same-sex marriage license in Kentucky when her state specifically says by 75% of the voters that marriage means one man, one woman? Can you cite the statute at the federal or state level that she's supposed to follow? Even the very form that she fills out specifically lists a male and a female. Does she have the authority just to scratch that out and create her own?
Doesn't she have the duty to obey a legal order from the court?
Well, you obey it if it's right. So I go back to my question. Is slavery the law of the land? Should it have been the law of the land because Dred Scott said so? Was that a correct decision? Should the courts have been irrevocably followed on that? Should Lincoln have been put in jail because he ignored it? I mean, that's the fundamental question. Do we have a check and balance system? Do we have three equal branches, or do we have one supreme branch, not just a Supreme Court?
As I mentioned earlier, if you were with us just after 8 o'clock news, and I brought this up, why isn't someone like Snuffleupagus challenging all of those people who are behind the sanctuary city movement? Because if you cannot be selective then. They're claiming that this woman, Kim Davis, is being selective, but the fellow travelers on the left, they are major league hypocrites. Lefty is selective with the law. Take a listen to this for a moment.
Gavin Newsom in San Francisco as mayor performed same-sex weddings even though it was illegal. Did he ever get put in jail? He most certainly did not. You have Barack Obama and Eric Holder when he was Attorney General. They ignored the rulings of DOMA. Did they get put in jail for ignoring the law? They most certainly did not. So when is it that liberals get to choose which laws they support, but a county clerk in Kentucky who, acting on her Christian faith, is criminalized, jailed without bail because she acted on her conscience and according to the only law that is in front of her?
When he mentioned DOMA, that was the Defense of Marriage Act that even the Clintons signed off on back in the 1990s and then disavowed when they thought the political winds happened to be changing. I think that he brings up some excellent points there, and you would think that the left would be a bit more uncomfortable with this, but they're not. While they criticize people of religious faith, they claim that their viewpoint is a self-evident truth. They have even less evidence than we have when it comes to these matters. One more quick one here from Governor Huckabee. This might be the coup de grace in this argument.
Well, when you say the federal government recognizes it, what statute under which do they recognize it? They do it by decree, but there is no congressionally or voted upon statute. George,
so
let me give you an example. When I was governor, let me finish this because it's very important. When I was governor, we had a Supreme Court case on school finance that said we were inadequate and inequitable. They ruled. I read the ruling. I agreed with it. I knew it was right. But I didn't just sit out at my desk and start writing new checks to school districts. We had to go back to the legislature, come up with a school funding formula. It was passed. I signed it. And then we ordered the Department of Education to send checks. We are bypassing the process when we have one branch of government acting as it has authority over the other two. And what I'm coming back to, and I think people are missing this, either we live under the rule of law, which is a three-branch checks and balances system of government, or we end up with what I think was so powerful when Lincoln said this, and I want to read this. He said, if the policy of the government upon vital questions affecting the whole people is to be irrevocably fixed by decisions of the Supreme Court the instant they are made, then in personal actions the people will have ceased to be their own rulers, having to that extent practically resigned their government into the hands of this eminent tribunal.
There you go. Governor Mike Huckabee speaking with George Snuffleupagus over the weekend on ABC's This Week. More on this subject coming up. Also have a couple of things I want to share with you about refugees before we wrap up the show today. Do you know how your fellow travelers treat religious faith? Over the weekend, there was an event in New Hampshire, and you had a group of women in comfortable shoes. They formed a choir, and what they do is they take old gospel songs or spirituals, and then they substitute their own fellow traveling language for words like Jesus or God, which tells you that they're worshiping human beings. Here's a fine example of it. Women in comfortable shoes, they sing "Woke Up This Morning," but they substitute the name Hillary for Jesus. Take a listen.
Stay on Hillary, woke up this morning with my mind. Stay on Hillary, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Woke up this morning with my mind, but stay on Hillary.
It just seems strange to hear that sound coming out of a group of people with buzz cuts. 844, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Do want to remind you tomorrow morning, because it's a compressed week, this is our Monday on Tuesday, because it's a compressed week, we're going to be joined in studio between 8:30 and 9 o'clock tomorrow morning by Dr. Jonathan Tripp, or one of Dr. Tripp's associates from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls. And going to have a medical discussion. And the question we like to ask is, when was the last time you had an opportunity to ask a friend about a medical issue? Well, this is that opportunity. You can give us a call while the doctor's in studio. We had a great question from a woman last week talking about some issues in her life. In fact, it dealt with all of you who've had chickenpox. You're going to be aware that you are an imminent threat when it comes to developing shingles later in life. And I was one of those people. It hasn't happened to me yet. Not looking forward to it. But this woman even had them in her eyes. And she called the doctor and had a discussion with him about that on air. This is your opportunity to get those questions answered, and it won't cost you a thing. Just pick up the telephone and give us a call. That's Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine between 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning. It takes place on Wednesday mornings. And, of course, the office, Dr. Jonathan Tripp's office, is on Fillmore Street directly across from the main post office right here in Twin Falls on Fillmore Street. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. You can reach our program today by giving us a call at 736-0300. That's 736-0300, or drop me an email at bill.colley, and that's spelled Colley, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. You're up next, and you're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, I only caught part of your story. What organization is that Rochelle Williams for? Because I'm involved with therapeutic horseback riding, and her name's not familiar.
She's a volunteer, and what they're doing is they're working with St. Luke's, and this is to help out with some of the disabled children in the area.
Oh, okay, because our organization is called Rising Stars, and we have 92 riders, most of which are kids with Downs, autism, and cerebral palsy. So anyway, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for listening, too, by the way. That's always a good sign. 736-0300. You catch somebody's attention out there now and then. 736-0300. Also, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And you're listening this morning to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I also wanted to remind you just before we wrap up this segment of the program, I've been mentioning our friends at Tint Lady for the last couple of months on the air, and I had said last week the hot weather is going to be pretty much gone. It's not true. It's coming back. And so there's a reminder here, and I'll get to my telephone caller in just a moment. But we're going to be looking at some temperatures around that 90-degree range for a few days, again, later this week, maybe going into next week. And that means if you don't have window tints and you're sitting near that window, you're going to learn the meaning of baking. If you have tints, on the other hand, it can reduce that convection heat by up to 72%. Tint Lady will do a free estimate. All you've got to do is give them a call or contact them online. TintLadyIdaho.com. The telephone number is 736-8469. This will save on your cooling bills as well. Locally owned and operated, 20 years experience plus. Located at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only, closed Sundays. A little bit like Chick-fil-A in that sense. You always want to go right after church, and then you remember, I can't go until Monday. Oh, well, it's probably not a bad thing. And remember, don't squint, get tint. You're up next, and you're on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, you said you were getting ready to say something about Muslims. I didn't know if you heard about Ted Nugent in Chicago walking through the city, and he ran into a Muslim bookstore, and he walked in, and because he looked out of place, the clerk came over and asked him what he needed, and Ted says, well, I need Donald Trump's book on U.S. immigration policy regarding Muslims and illegal Mexicans. The clerk yelled and says, get out and stay out. And he says, yes, that's the one. That's the book I want. Do you have that in paperback?
I actually have a friend. He was just listening to the show the other day, and he used to work with Ted Nugent on a couple of Ted's reality TV series. Great guy. Hey, thank you much. Thank you for the call. My friend Jake Smith has a company called, Jake's been on this program. He was a guest with us a couple of months ago on a separate topic, but he has a company called Media Safety Services. And he was the safety consultant for Jackass, which was a TV show for children, well, older children. And then he was a safety consultant on a couple of Ted Nugent's television shows as well, and has shared, in fact, managed to line Ted up with an interview on a radio show I was doing in Delaware some years ago because of that. 10 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 736-0300 or bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. National Review. Kevin Williamson, who might be one of the best writers in all of America, reflecting on this Kim Davis situation, he says he has an admiration for her. He said the proper course of action for a government official who has a moral objection to carrying out public duties isn't obstruction, but resignation. But then he goes on to say this: prison is an excellent place for a Christian. It is also an excellent place for a patriot. Legally speaking, American marriage is debased. The traditional marriage we hear about from time to time simply has not existed as a legal institution in the United States now for about 40 years. And he has this near the end of this piece. Davis's transgressions are trivial next to the entrenched criminality of the government that Judge Benning serves. The Internal Revenue Service, under the Obama White House, was converted into a crime syndicate. Hillary Rodham Clinton is a rolling crime wave. The Justice Department is an enabler and protector of felons in high places. Our law enforcement agencies have been made into instruments of political intimidation, as in the matter of the ATF's persecution of Jay Dobbins. There are many honorable men in federal government, but there are no honorable federal officials because one cannot honorably serve a dishonorable government. We may call Judge Benning his honor or Judge Bunning his honor, but he says that is purely vestigial. So there you have it. Another person taking a look at this situation. As I said, in the matter of the last couple of days, we've seen people who were saying, bad idea, she should just quit. Here's the other part of this. What if you quit and you've got no other job? I guess people could do that, but I used to hear that a lot from people who would say, well, you should take a principled stand and quit your job. What if you've got children to feed? What if you've got children who have needs, medical needs, and you need that insurance coverage? How come people, it's always safe to talk about that if you're sitting on a big nest egg and you don't have to worry about it. But for a great many Americans out there, you know what the labor force participation is? Do you know, I was reading this morning, get this, there are now more American women on food stamps than American women who are working. Do you know what the job prospects are in rural Kentucky where this woman is from? Do you know what happens if she resigns the job and walks away from it? Where does she go? Well, she'd go on welfare, I guess, right? That's what the Obama White House would tell her to do. Don't worry, we'll just print more money and ensure that you can pay your bills. We'll pay for your heating and we'll pay for your rent and we'll pay for your food. And don't worry about it. That's what government's all about. But all of those people out there, the high and mighty who say you should resign that job and just, make your stand that way. Well, she's making a heck of a stand sitting behind bars right now as we speak. 8:53, Bill Colley with you. Top story, 55 now. Finally starting to see that temperature move upward this morning after about an hour's worth of sunshine, almost a couple of hours now. We do want to point out we're looking for a high somewhere in the 80s today, which would be quite a nice change to what we saw over the holiday weekend. And I do want to mention coming up, because our caller referenced this too, I've got a couple of things I'm going to share in the next hour with you about the refugee crisis. I just don't want to jump the gun, because I'd like to split things up a little bit this morning. And some people may be wondering on this Tuesday morning, where is Steve Millington? Steve had another commitment and just dropped me a line yesterday and said that he would be back in with us most likely next week. So we'll look forward to seeing him Tuesday of next week and get a review of what's going on in Republican Party politics. Just a couple of other quick things on this Kim Davis story before we wrap that portion of the program up. A fellow by the name of William McGurn, writing at the Wall Street Journal, which again, the Journal the other day was not supportive of her, but over the course of the weekend, its op-ed pages suddenly turned around. And he said, all right, she's not Sir Thomas More. He resigned his job. He walked away when he couldn't support the King of England. Of course, he also got locked up in the Tower, and then he got his head chopped off. And then he went on to say, the conflict that sent her there is just as unnecessary today as it was in Tudor England. It remains an extraordinary thing in America to see an elected official who chooses jail over violating her convictions. He says, is the priority ensuring that the county's gay couples can get the marriage licenses they are entitled to without hassle, or is it breaking a Kentucky woman asking for an accommodation? If the goal is the former, he writes, to ensure the issuing of licenses, there are any number of solutions. Because, though Ms. Davis makes clear that she believes same-sex marriage is a violation of God's law, she's not asking the state of Kentucky to share this view or even deny couples. What she objects to is that marriage licenses come with her name affixed to the certificate. She asks the state to find a way around this. There is a view in polite society that if the issue is simply forced, opposition to same-sex marriage will wither away. But then again, polite society may not be that familiar with the people who have a fear of God and are willing to suffer for it. I'm telling you right now, if there were 100,000, no, 1,000 Kim Davises across the country who suddenly were willing to go to jail for this, media could not ignore it. If there were 10,000, media certainly couldn't ignore it. If there were 100,000, the country would cease to function. Think about that for a moment. I was on a radio show one day and someone said, well, how do we bring an end to all of this government perfidy? And I said, a general strike. You just simply, those of you, it doesn't take many. It wouldn't take the entire working population. And I know we're talking about people who'd have to make some great sacrifices in their lives. And again, it is true. Some who cannot afford to lose their jobs just might lose their jobs. But there were people who were fighting the American Revolution who lost their lives so that we were going to be blessed with liberty, which we don't have a whole lot of left any longer. We've lost that choice in this situation. But think about this for a moment. They're trying to put Christianity out of business in this country. And most people who claim to be Christians, it's a mild association. On the other hand, if you find the really committed, devout Christians, those who are regularly in church, those who really take their convictions seriously and they take the Word of God seriously, if all of a sudden they all rose up and said no, and maybe it's just a few million, but it would cripple this country. And it wouldn't be, we would fill the jails, but we would also simply close all of the offices down all over this country. Government would cease. And within a week to 10 days, you'd have old Barack Hussein Obama begging these people, first of all, freeing them from behind bars, but begging them to get back to work. And then we can negotiate. And then we can say we've had enough. See, it's not always about elections. There are a great many other options that people have out there that I think sometimes they overlook. Now, I can't change much from this microphone in Twin Falls, Idaho. We're going to need someone with the power of a Glenn Beck to get behind an idea like this, and I don't know how long that's going to happen. I will tell you this. I didn't think I'd ever see Beck breaking bread with Donald Trump. But both Beck and Donald Trump are going to be participating in a rally that is opposed to the Iranian nuclear deal. So strange things can happen like that. But we're going to need someone who's got a much bigger megaphone to play the role of Pied Piper and to ask all of us to make that sacrifice. But you know what? Your children and your grandchildren will thank you for it when it's all said and done. And it may not happen tomorrow or a year from now, but they'll be sitting around a Thanksgiving dinner sometime, 30, 40 years out into the future, and they'll say, you know what? Dad did, or Mom did, or Grandpa did. It won't go away. It'll stay with them for generations to come. It's 8:59. News from Fox on the way. Some thoughts about the refugee crisis in Europe and how it impacts us too coming in the next hour.